All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the world of artificial intelligence, but probably not where you're thinking. We're talking about the super complex field of material science.
Okay, so what if our most powerful scientific tool isn't a theory at all, but a dream? Yeah, I know, it sounds a little out there, but stick with me, because we're about to see how this whole new way of thinking, one that comes from data and, well, some really complex functions, is cracking problems that we used to think were just impossible.
So, to really get why we even need a new kind of tool, we've got to start with section one, what I'm calling the complexity crisis. You really have to appreciate the just mind-boggling scale of the problems that scientists are facing every day.
Okay, let's put you in the driver's seat. Imagine this is your job. You need to design a part for a power plant. Simple enough, right? Well, here's the catch. It has to handle a blistering 620 degrees Celsius, nonstop, for 40 years. And the material? Oh, it's just this complex alloy with, at least 20 different elements. Plus it's been processed and welded and heat treated. I mean, seriously, where would you even start?
And this right here is where traditional science just hits a brick wall. Professor Bayesian from Cambridge University puts it perfectly. He says, even if you had a complete, perfect description of a material, you know every single atom, every process, our best scientific theories, even if we had a theory of everything, they'd still fail. His exact words were, there is no way anyone in the world can predict any of these properties. That's a huge statement.
So, this creates a massive dilemma for scientists. The usual way of doing things is, simplify the problem, try to make it fit into a nice, neat equation. But the thing is, with material science, the moment you simplify it, you lose the technology. You have to dive right into the full, messy, glorious complexity of it all, because that's actually where the real-world performance is.
So, if you can't simplify it, how on earth are scientists supposed to tackle this kind of complexity? Well, that brings us to section 2. We're going to go inside the neural network. We're going to demystify that whole dream thing and see how this incredibly powerful tool is built right from the ground up. Believe it or not, it all starts with something you probably learned back in school, a simple linear equation. You just take your inputs, like, say, the amount of carbon and phosphorus you've got in a piece of steel, you multiply them by some weights, add them up, and boom, you get a prediction for a property like toughness. Now, if you draw that out, inputs on one side, a little calculation in the middle, and an output on the other, you've just made a basic neural network. Seriously, it's that simple at its core. But, okay, the real world is rarely a straight line, right? So the next step is to add in something that can handle curves. We introduce a flexible, nonlinear function, something like a hyperbolic tangent. All that really means is it lets the model draw curvy lines instead of just straight ones. These little functions get added as hidden units inside the network. And this is where Professor Bayesian jokes that creating something this flexible feels like it must have come from a bad dream. But honestly, this is where the real magic happens. And what's crazy is you don't need a ton of these to get incredible results. By adding just 4 of these nonlinear hidden units and tweaking their weights, you can make a function, as he says, sing and dance. The model suddenly has this insane flexibility, which lets it map out those extremely complicated patterns you find in real scientific data.
Okay, but with great power comes, well, This flexibility is a double-edged sword. If you want to use these models as a real scientific instrument and not just a party trick, you have to watch out for 2 massive pitfalls. And that's what we're talking about in section 3.
So, pitfall number 1 is probably the most famous one. It's called overfitting. This is what happens when your model is so flexible that it doesn't just learn the pattern in your data, it basically memorizes the data itself, including all the random noise. Kind of like what you're seeing on the left. It looks perfect on that data, but it's totally useless on anything new. So the solution, you can see it on the right, is absolutely crucial. You split your data. You use one chunk to train the model, but you keep a separate test set hidden away. That way, you can check if it actually learned a real rule or if it just, cheated and memorized the answers to the test.
All right, the second pitfall is a little more subtle, and honestly, I think it's even more profound. It's this idea of modeling uncertainty. This is what happens when you can find a whole bunch of completely different mathematical functions that all perfectly explain the data you already have. The big problem? Well, they all behave completely differently when you ask them to predict something new.
And this slide does a great job of showing what that actually looks like. See the circles? That's our data, the stuff we know. In region B, all 3 of those curvy lines fit the data pretty well. They all agree.
But then look over at region A, where we don't have any data. The functions go wild. They completely disagree. That gap, that disagreement between them, that is the modeling uncertainty. It's the model basically telling you, hey, over here I'm pretty confident, but over there, I'm just guessing. So here's the really clever solution. Scientists don't build just one model and blindly trust it. No way. They create hundreds of different models. Then they map out where all those models agree, and, this is the important part, where they disagree. That map of disagreement literally shows them where their knowledge is thin and points them directly to where they need to go run more experiments. It's a roadmap for discovery.
Okay, so we've seen the theory, we've seen the pitfalls, but what happens when you master these techniques? How does this lead to actual real-world breakthroughs? That's what we're getting into in Section 4, Designing the Future.
All right, check this out. Using these super carefully built models, a scientist took on the challenge of high-performance nickel alloys. We're talking the stuff they use in jet engines. The stuff is amazing, but it's also incredibly expensive, like as much as silver. So they trained a model on mountains of data and figured out how to redesign the alloy. They actually degraded its properties just enough to make it affordable for huge power plants. And the result? A brand new nickel alloy that is, and I'm quoting the creator here, dirt cheap. That's a game changer.
But, okay, get ready for what might be the most mind-blowing example of all. A model designed to predict metal fatigue. You know, that's the process where materials crack and fail after being stressed over and over. It's obviously super important for safety in everything from bridges to airplanes.
Now, here's the key detail. You have to lock this in for what's coming next. This model was trained only on data from steels. That's it. It learned everything it knows about the physics of fatigue from just one single class of material. And this is where you see the real scientific payoff. The team took their model that only knew about steel, and they tested it on completely different materials it had never, ever seen before. So did it predict fatigue in steel? Well, yeah, of course. But what about nickel alloys? Yup. Titanium alloys? You bet. Even aluminum alloys? Yes. The model had somehow learned such a fundamental relationship that it could generalize across totally different types of metal. I mean, this isn't just some black box spitting out answers. This is a tool that has captured real, actual, transferable scientific knowledge.
This result is so remarkable, it brings us all the way back to that big, kind of weird question we started with. What does this incredible predictive power actually mean? Let's dig into that in our final section, a glimpse of intelligence.
So one expert on the subject breaks down intelligence into two key parts. First, you've got episodic memory. That's basically the ability to remember stuff from the past. And second, you need the ability to use that information to make plans for the future. Well, think about what these models are actually doing. They are effectively remembering the outcomes from these huge archives of past experiments. That's their episodic memory. And then they use that memory to help plan the design of future materials, pointing scientists in the most promising directions. So by that definition, you could say these neural networks are showing a real, if very specific, form of intelligence. They're becoming this powerful new partner for human scientists. This is a really profound shift in how science gets done. It's changing discovery from this slow, super expensive process of just trial and error into a guided, intelligent exploration of what's even possible. And that leaves us with one last, pretty big thought. If these tools can remember the past to help us design the future, then what in the world should we discover next?